everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and I'll be hanging out with you today as we continue on in our series of Living World. Almost done with it though, 3 videos, and then we are finished. So today we're talking about brain regions. Let me get your objectives, and then we'll get on into it. So by the end of the video, know or be able to do the following things. First of all, be able to describe the functions of the major regions of the brain, and after that, explain how sleep, the biological clock, and emotions are regulated. So before we get into it, let's do a quick overview, and then we'll get more specific. So first up, specialization. A divided brain serves many functions. Now, the brain is certainly the most complex thing we've got going on in our body, and really the only way that it can be so complex and do as many things as it does is to be divided up with each region specialized for a different thing. And obviously each of those regions needs to be able to talk to each other and coordinate, but there are different parts of the brain that focus on doing specific things, and that's basically what the rest of our video is about. So we're going to start out by breaking down each of the major regions, and then we're going to talk about how a couple specific functions are regulated. So first major division of the brain you need to know about is the cerebrum, and that is going to be most of the part that you think of as being the brain. It is the folded up section on the top of the head above the brainstem and above the cerebellum. We'll talk about both of those in a second, but major thing about the cerebrum is it's basically the part that makes humans, that makes mammals and vertebrates much more complex than other organisms. It's where a lot of our movement and stuff happens. So let's go through some specific pieces of the cerebrum. So as far as the cerebrum is concerned, it's responsible for the following. First of all, it does muscle contraction, learning, emotion, memory, perception. So it controls our muscle movements. It helps us to learn things. It helps us to respond emotionally, form memories, perceive the world around us. A lot of really complex things that aren't seen in types of animals that have got a very reduced cerebrum. It is divided into the left and right hemispheres, and as you know, each of those hemispheres is kind of associated with a different function. Right brain, creativity, things like that. Left brain, very analytical side. Right side controls the left side controls the right sides of the body. The cerebral cortex, that would be the outside of the cerebrum, the really folded up part, is a center of perception, voluntary movement, and learning. And like I just said, the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. And it's integrated via the corpus callosum. This is a big old bundle of axons that runs from one side of the brain to the other, and it essentially allows the sides to talk to each other. Next up is going to be the cerebellum, and it sits right below the cerebrum. I'll show you some other diagrams that'll kind of give it a little more, a little clearer view of where it sits. And it's basically the quality control center of the body. So specifically, the things that it does are as follows. So the cerebellum is responsible for coordination and movement. So as the cerebrum is sensing some information from the muscular system, it's sending out information about what it wants the body to do. That is all coordinated through the cerebellum. It's in charge of learning and remembering motor skills. It receives information on body positions, and by that I mean like where are your joints, how long are your muscles. This goes with that whole coordination of movement thing, where it understands like the position of each part of the body so that it can use that information about the positions of the parts of the body to coordinate a movement like catching a ball or turning your head or something like that. And it monitors and coordinates motor commands from the cerebrum. So when the cerebrum sends a signal that says, hey, I need the hand to move, it monitors that and makes sure that the body is ready to do that, and then make sure that a quality movement results. Now, damage to the cerebellum can result in significant impairment with regard to hand-eye coordination and movement control and things of that nature. Next up, we have the diencephalon, which is buried deep inside of the brain. You can see on the picture there, the cerebellum that I just talked about is down below it. The diencephalon is in charge of sorting and sending information to different parts of the cerebral cortex, and it includes the right thalamus, left thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland is an extension of the diencephalon. Specific things, there are several specific things that go with the diencephalon. So it gives rise to the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the epithalamus. If you remember back to our last set of videos, or our last, kind of topic, you should be associating this with the endocrine system. It receives and sorts and sends sensory information to the cerebral centers. So when sensory information comes in about temperature or things you're seeing or hearing or feeling, that's going to go through the diencephalon, and then it's going to be sorted out and sent to different centers of the cerebrum. It contains the body's thermostat and the biological clock. We'll talk about those in a little bit. And it controls hunger, thirst, sex, fight or flight, all of this via the endocrine system. So diencephalon is the big seat of the endocrine system, and thus our hormones that we talked about a little bit back. Finally, up on the march of brain pieces, we have got the brain stem. Now, this is a really good kind of overview picture, so let me highlight a couple things on it real quick. Cerebrum is all this stuff up here. This right here is the cerebellum. Right here you got the diencephalon, and here's the brain stem right here. And I'm going to talk about what that does real quick, and then we're going to do kind of specific stuff, and then we are done. So for the brainstem, several things to keep track of. It consists of the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata, commonly known as the medulla. The midbrain specifically receives sensory information, especially auditory. So most of the axons from our ears terminate in the midbrain. It also coordinates visual response. So the whole fact that the right eye is hooked up to the left side of the brain and the left eye is hooked to the right side of the brain, that crossover happens within the midbrain. It consists of the pons and medulla, which are responsible for the following. They transfer information between the peripheral nervous system, the midbrain, and the forebrain. So all that sensory information that's coming in from the peripheral nervous system, that gets transferred through the pons and the medulla. It coordinates large-scale movements, and by large-scale movements I mean things like climbing, running, things that include multiple parts of the body working together. And the medulla specifically controls automatic homeostatic activity. So there's going to be like heartbeat and breathing and blood vessel dilation, things like that. Three final things to talk about. We're going to talk about how the brain takes care of a couple major functions. So the first one is arousal and sleep. And arousal and sleep is a very interesting state that scientists don't quite understand, especially sleeping. During sleeping, we know that the brain can be almost as active as when you are awake. It's kind of like processing things. A lot of scientists think that sleep, the function of sleep might be to consolidate memory, but they're still not quite sure what it's about. Major player in sleep is going to be the reticular formation. And what the reticular formation does is it filters sensory info and kind of sends it to different parts of the brain. During sleep, the reticular formation is kind of controlling which stimuli coming into your body are being responded to and which ones aren't, so allowing you to kind of stay asleep. And then you got the pineal gland secreting melatonin, and it's been shown that melatonin is coordinated with going to sleep. So the more melatonin in your body, the sleepier you are. So those things kind of work together to produce either arousal, being awake, or sleep. And remember, sleep is a fairly poorly understood activity. We got the biological clock. There's a piece of brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is buried deep within the brain, around the midbrain. And what it does is it receives visual cues, and then it coordinates those visual cues with the endocrine system to coordinate the biological clock. So this is going to be the sleep-wake cycle. It's been fairly well shown that even in the absence of visual cues such as darkness, the body will still run on a regular sleep-wake cycle. So the coordination of that, the setting of your clock, happens through the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Last slide for the day. You got emotions. Now, the emotions are coordinated through a group of brain sections collectively known as the limbic system. You can see right there on the picture on the right, the limbic system is all the stuff that is highlighted. So there are several things that work together in the production and memory of emotions. One thing specifically to remember is the amygdala. And the amygdala is one of the things that tags emotion to memory. So you see something that is scary, that produces fear in you. Next time you see that thing, your body will automatically respond with a fear response because that visual cue has been tagged to a response or an emotional response of fear. Same thing goes with other emotions. You see someone you love, next time you see them, love can be produced, or the memory of love can be produced by the visual cue of that person. So it's kind of like tagging things together where this visual cue becomes associated with this emotion, or this smell becomes associated with this emotion. So coordination, memory of emotions, that happens through the amygdala. And that's it. I know my words were a little stuttery. I'm tired this morning. Forgive me if I was scattered, but hopefully that helped you get a little better handle on what different parts of the brains do. Different parts of the brain do. Thanks for joining us on the Lab 207 webcast. My name is Mr. Kite, and we'll see you again.